You know how some stories start small, with a little annoyance, and then balloon into this multi-year legal drama that changes your view of humanity? Yeah, that's my life now. It all started with a simple, 4-foot wooden gate, a gate, on my property, that I put up, and ended with the most intense, yoga pants-wearing HOA president you could ever imagine dialing 911 on me. I'm Ben Carter, by the way. My wife, Sarah, is the reason we won, but I'm the one who had to stand there in the rain, looking like the bad guy. We bought our place in Whispering Pines Estates for the quiet. It's a dead-end loop, Willow Bend Way, and our yard is the last one, meaning we have this long, beautiful side yard that backs right up to the Maple Creek, the kind of creek that gurgles and makes you feel like you're actually out in nature. It was perfect. Our golden retriever, Zeus, had room to run, Sarah had her herb garden, and I had my Adirondack chair for quiet evenings. For 2 years, it was exactly that, quiet, perfect, ours. Then the Thorns moved in. Across the street. And peace became a legend. Brenda Thorne. Picture a Category 5 hurricane, but she smells faintly of lavender and carries a laminated clipboard. Within 6 months, she'd seized control of our sleepy little homeowners association. Suddenly, we had rules for the exact shade of gray our mailboxes had to be, strict timelines for holiday lights, and woe betide you if your trash cans were visible past 8:59 a.m. on Tuesday. She was a force, ruthless, pushy, and had a stare that could make a latte curdle. Now, Brenda had a teenage son named Jake. Jake was basically a miniature, acne-riddled, dirt bike riding Brenda. And Jake and his little squad of BMX bandits immediately discovered that my long, beautiful side yard was the perfect high-speed shortcut, a ramp, basically, to get to the trails by the creek. They'd come tearing through, whooping, kicking up my new mulch, leaving ruts in the grass. It was bad enough, but one afternoon, Jake flew past and nearly clotheslined Zeus. My dog yelped, scrambled under the porch, and hid for an hour. That was it. That was the line. I'm stubborn, but I'm fair. I put on my nice guy face and walked over. I explained the situation to Brenda, politely. I said, "Look, I don't mind the kids playing, but this is my private property, and it's dangerous." She gave me that tight, plastic HOA smile and said, "Boys will be boys, Ben. They're just enjoying the community's natural resources." I pointed out, again, that my land wasn't a community resource. Her smile didn't change, but her eyes got colder than an Arctic blast. "It's been an open path for years, Ben. It would be a shame to disrupt that tradition." As she turned away, she whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "Keep using it, Jake. He'll cave." Yeah. No. Talking was out. Time for construction. I spent a weekend building the gate. It wasn't some iron fortress, it was a simple, nice-looking cedar gate, 4 feet high, matching the fence perfectly. It met every single obscure HOA guideline in their 150-page covenant book. I checked 3 times. But the beauty was in the hardware, a simple latch on the inside, sure, but I added a heavy-duty, shrouded padlock, and then, just to be sure, a hidden deadbolt set into a rebar-laced post. It was beautiful over-engineering. The first time Jake and his buddies saw it, they were furious. I heard the rattling and kicking from inside my home office and just turned up my music. A few days later, though, I was grilling outside when I heard the commotion again, but this time, Jake was screaming into his phone. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser, lights flashing, pulled onto our quiet Willow Bend Way. Brenda was already marching across the street, playing the concerned citizen to perfection. "Thank you for coming, officers," she boomed, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. My son and his friends were trying to use the public access path to the creek, and this man, she pointed a sharp finger at me, has illegally barricaded it. They're trapped. I stayed calm, wiping my hands on a towel. Sarah was right behind me, recording everything on her phone. She's smart like that. I explained to the older officer, The one with the massive mustache and the 1,000-yard stare of a man who'd seen 1,000 of these stupid arguments, that it was private property. Jake, meanwhile, was practically hyperventilating, doing the full performance. He's holding us hostage. We can't get to the creek. The officer just sighed. A deep, profound, existential sigh. He walked to the gate. He looked at it from Jake's side. He looked at it from my side. And he didn't say a single word. He just reached his arm over the top, slid the simple latch open with his finger, and the gate swung wide. It wasn't locked yet. He turned to Jake, his face completely deadpan. "This," he said, voice gravelly and slow, "is how gates work." Jake blinked. "So, we're not trapped." The officer just stared. Brenda hissed, "It's a public path." The officer replied, "Ma'am, sidewalks are public. Backyards are hobbies." The young cop behind him choked back a laugh. Brenda's face went from pale to red to this strange, ugly purple. Humiliation, pure and simple. As the officers were leaving, the older one caught my eye. He gave me a slight, grim nod. "This might be over for us," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear over Brenda muttering to herself. "But I get the feeling it's just starting for you." He was right. That look on Brenda's face wasn't embarrassment. It was a declaration of war. For a week, there was tense silence. Then, the first shot in her new war arrived in our mailbox, a crisp white envelope from the HOA. Inside was an official violation notice. Charge, installation of an unauthorized structure. Fine, $50. The structure, of course, was my perfectly compliant gate. My first reaction was a flash of hot anger. My second was a cold, methodical calm. Okay. She wants to play by the book. We'll use the whole book, not just the pages she likes. Sarah, the organized one, immediately created a new folder on our desktop labeled, HOA, the Thorn Conflict. She's the tech wizard and the documentation master. I handle the stubborn resistance. We make a good team. I spent that evening with a glass of bourbon and a copy of the HOA's CC and RS, 150 pages of mind-numbing legalese. But there it was, crystal clear: fences and gates are permissible on side yards provided they are constructed of wood, do not exceed 6 feet in height, and maintain a consistent aesthetic. My gate was 4 feet, cedar, and looked like it had been there forever. Unimpeachably compliant. I wrote a polite, formal letter quoting the bylaw verbatim and sent it certified mail. 2 weeks later, the rejection came. No reason given. The fine was now $100, plus a $25 late fee. And then the floodgates opened. Suddenly, we were in violation of everything. A notice for improper lawn maintenance because a patch of grass was a 1/4 inch above the maximum allowable 3-inch height. Another for leaving the garbage cans out until 6 p.m., 1 hour past the 5 p.m. deadline. Each notice was $50. It was systematic harassment, designed to bleed us dry and break our will. The worst part was the inspections. Twice a week, around 10 o'clock at night, Brenda and some toad-faced board member named Mike would creep along the sidewalk, shining high-powered flashlights into our windows, meticulously searching for any tiny infraction. Sarah caught them on our Ring camera, 2 shadowy figures lingering in front of our house far longer than anyone else's. It felt creepy. It felt like being watched. Hunted. That's when Sarah had the idea for the proof wall. We cleared a huge corkboard in my office and printed everything, every violation letter, copies of our certified mail receipts, screenshots of Brenda and Mike on their nightly prowl. We pinned the relevant bylaws right in the center, highlighting where we were compliant and where they were violating their own rules. It started looking like one of those conspiracy boards from a detective movie, with strings of yarn connecting the evidence. Our neighbor, Mr. Harrison, a retired accountant with a PhD in neighborhood gossip, saw what was happening. He cornered me while I was meticulously trimming the lawn, making sure it was exactly 3 inches. "She's trying to squeeze you out, Ben," he whispered over the hedge. "She did the same to the Millers a few years back over the color of their front door. Fined them into the ground until they painted it HOA-approved taupe." Mr. Harrison became our intel source, telling us the folklore of Brenda's tyranny. Apparently, she once tried to fine him for having unharmonious wind chimes. I blinked. "Is B-flat illegal now?" He said, dead serious, "Only on Tuesdays." The fines kept piling up. The proof wall total was over $500. Then one night, Sarah was reviewing the security footage, a ritual now, and she froze. "Ben," she said, her voice tight. "You need to see this. It's not just flashlights anymore." I walked over. Hovering just above our back fence was a small, dark shape with 4 whirring propellers and a single red light, staring right into our yard. The war had just gone airborne. Watching that little drone felt like a profound violation. It hovered for 2 full minutes, panning slowly across the gate, then our patio, before zipping away over the trees. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to run outside with a baseball bat, a garden hose, anything to knock that pest out of the sky. But Sarah put a hand on my arm. "Don't," she said softly. "That's what they want. You break it, you commit a crime. They call the cops on you, and this time, they have a real reason." She was right. We couldn't beat her by playing her game. We had to be smarter. We had to use the rules, logic, and the law, the very things she was twisting. Sarah, my brilliant tech-savvy wife, immediately went into research mode. She zoomed in on the footage until she identified the make and model of the drone, then spent an hour becoming an expert on FAA regulations for residential areas. It turned out, recording into our fenced yard violated state privacy laws. The next evening, we were ready. Sure enough, just after dusk, the drone appeared again. Sarah had her DSLR on a tripod, steady and time-stamped. As the drone hovered, she started snapping pictures. Razor-clear shots. Then she got the money shot. As the drone turned, the setting sun glinted off the side, and she captured a perfect, high-resolution image of the FAA registration number printed on its landing gear. It was tiny, but it was as good as a license plate. While she was doing that, I was on my laptop with a flight tracking app, logging the drone's position, altitude, and the exact time and duration of its flight. We did this for 3 nights in a row. We built a perfect, undeniable record of every single incursion. On the 4th day, we acted. We didn't call Brenda. We didn't send an angry letter. We went official. We filed a police report and an FAA complaint, then sent a certified letter to the entire HOA board with both case numbers. We simply stated we were being subjected to drone surveillance, that we had gathered evidence, and had filed official reports. We weren't accusing her, just informing her we were taking the harassment seriously and creating a legal paper trail that led straight to her doorstep. The effect was immediate. The drone disappeared. The violation notices kept arriving like clockwork, but the aerial surveillance stopped cold. We had struck a nerve. We had shown her we wouldn't be intimidated, and we knew how to fight back within the system. A few days later, Mr. Harrison appeared with a plate of warm snickerdoodles. "Heard you had a peeping Tom with propellers," he chuckled, lowering his voice. "Just so you know, I saw Brenda's boy, Jake, down at the park last month, bragging about the fancy new drone his mom bought him." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It was her. The proof wall gained a new section, glossy prints of the drone, copies of the FAA complaint, and my handwritten flight logs. We were gaining control, but we still didn't understand the most important part: why? Why this insane, obsessive focus on our gate? It seemed like a ridiculous amount of effort for a simple shortcut. We wouldn't have the answer until one evening, weeks later, when Sarah was digging through public records online. She let out a sudden, sharp gasp. "Ben! Oh my God, Ben, I found it, she said, her eyes wide as she stared at the screen. I know why she wants that gate gone. It's not about the kids. It was never about the kids. I walked over to her desk. What I saw made the blood run cold. She had started by looking up old HOA meeting minutes and noticed a vague reference to a creekside beautification project. That led her to the County Planning Commission, where she requested all communications related to zoning near Whispering Pines Estates. The documents had finally arrived that afternoon. The centerpiece was a series of emails between Brenda Thorne, using her official HOA president email, and a man named Victor Reed, a VP at a company called the Riverstone Group. The emails laid out a secret backroom deal in stunning detail. The Riverstone Group had purchased the large undeveloped parcel across the creek. Their plan, a high-end eco-cabin resort for wealthy tourists. The key feature, the thing that would justify the $1,000 a night price tag, was an exclusive private nature trail and direct creek access for their guests. To get that access, they needed a path from their new development to our existing creek trails. Sarah clicked open a PDF attachment. It was an architectural map. A thick red line, designated a proposed pedestrian access corridor, ran from a planned footbridge over the creek, through the HOA common area, and then, straight down the side of a residential lot to the cul-de-sac. The lot the corridor cut through was ours. My side yard, the one with the new gate, was the linchpin for their entire multi-million-dollar development plan. The map was a deliberate fraud. It showed the corridor running through a public right-of-way, but Sarah and I knew from our property survey that no such right-of-way existed. That land was legally ours, all the way to the creek bank. Brenda Thorne had been promising this developer easy access, a clear path she had no legal right to offer. She was trying to give away our land to seal her deal. What was she getting in return? The emails were coy, but they mentioned a handsome community improvement fund that the developer would provide to the HOA, a fund that she, as president, would control. And a finder's fee for her role in facilitating the project. She was selling us out for her own personal and financial gain. Suddenly, everything made a terrifying kind of sense. The obsession with the gate wasn't about Jake's shortcut. It was a business obstacle. The 911 call wasn't just teenage drama, it was a calculated attempt to have the police officially declare our yard a public path. The endless fines were designed to harass us, to make our lives so miserable that we would either remove the gate or sell the house to someone more compliant. A calm, chilling rage washed over me. This woman wasn't just a power-tripping bully with a clipboard. She was a crook. She was actively engaged in a conspiracy to defraud us of our property rights. She's not just a bully, I said, my voice low and tight. She's a criminal. Sarah was already at the printer. She laminated the fraudulent map and pinned it squarely in the center of our proof wall. It was the heart of the conspiracy. Now we knew, but more importantly, Brenda didn't know that we knew. We had the element of surprise. We decided right then to keep this bombshell to ourselves. We would let her continue to think she was in control. We would let her make the next move, and we didn't have to wait long. A few days later, a new letter arrived. Red paper. A final notice. If the unauthorized structure was not removed within 48 hours, the HOA would place a lien on our property and begin legal proceedings. The deadline, Saturday at midnight. I checked the weather. A massive thunderstorm was predicted to roll in that Saturday evening, the kind of storm that makes you want to lock the doors and wait for morning, but Sarah and I weren't relaxing. We were on high alert. The storm arrived right on schedule, a full-blown tempest. The wind screamed like a banshee, and the rain hammered the house in sheets. It was 12:11 a.m. The HOA's midnight deadline was long past, and we were watching our security feeds, the Ring, the corner cams, and a new battery-powered trail cam Sarah had hidden in a birdhouse aimed directly at the side gate. Then, the motion ping. I pulled up the live feed on my tablet. Two figures, shrouded in dark hoodies, moved through the driving rain toward the gate. Even in the grainy night vision, I could tell it was Jake and one of his lanky friends. Jake knelt by the gate and pulled something long and metallic from his backpack. The security light glinted off it for a second. Bolt cutters. Every rational thought flew out of my head. All the planning, the documentation, the strategy, it all vanished, replaced by a raw, protective instinct. This wasn't a prank. They were on my property in the middle of a storm with tools actively trying to break in. "Sarah, call 911. Tell them someone is breaking into our property right now," I said, my voice tight. She was already on it. Body cams like clean audio, she reminded me, her eyes locked on the screen. Hands visible. "I've got the angles." I slipped out the back door into the raging storm. The wind and rain hit me like a physical blow. I rounded the corner of the house. They hadn't heard me over the howl of the wind. They were focused on the gate, Jake struggling to get the jaws of the cutters around the thick padlock. "Get away from my gate!" I yelled, my voice raw against the thunder. Jake whipped around, saw me, and without a second of hesitation, he lunged. He wasn't big, but he had momentum. He shoved me hard in the chest. I was completely off balance on the slick, muddy grass. My heel caught on a loose paving stone I'd been meaning to fix, and I went down hard. The back of my head hit the soft, muddy lawn with a dull thud. It was in that exact moment of helpless confusion that the world exploded in flashing blue and red lights. Sarah's call had been immediate. A patrol car screeched to a halt at the end of our driveway. The sight of the police car sent the two teens into a full-blown panic. Jake dropped the bolt cutters with a metallic clang, and they both took off, sprinting across the lawns and disappearing into the darkness. The same two officers from the first 911 call ran toward me, their flashlights cutting beams through the rain. They saw me on the ground, muddy, disoriented. They saw the bolt cutters by the gate. Before I could speak, a new voice cut through the chaos. "He attacked my son." It was Brenda, running out in her pajamas and a robe, her hair wild in the wind. Porch lights snapped on across the cul-de-sac. I saw the whole thing. Ben Carter assaulted my boy. My son was just trying to come home. It was a trap. It was a perfectly orchestrated, diabolical trap. She had sent her son to do the dirty work, and she was waiting, ready to flip the script the moment the police arrived. The young officer was already looking at me with suspicion. "Sir, can you tell us what happened?" he asked, his tone accusatory. From his perspective, he saw a grown man on the ground, two teenagers running away terrified, and their mother screaming about an assault. It was my word against hers. Just as the officer was helping me to my feet, my mind racing to find the words to defend myself, Sarah stepped out onto the porch. The rain slicked her hair to her face, but her expression was one of absolute, unwavering calm. Her eyes, however, were blazing. "Officer," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the wind and the rain and Brenda's hysterics. "You need to see this. And so does she. We'll watch it at half speed." She walked down the steps and turned her tablet screen toward Brenda. The video was already playing. Brenda's face, illuminated by the glow of the screen, went completely, utterly white. Because the video wasn't just from our camera. The first clip Sarah showed was from our hidden trail cam. The infrared footage was clear and undeniable. It showed Jake and his friend creeping up, it showed the bolt cutters, it showed me coming out and yelling, not charging, and it showed, from a perfect side angle, Jake turning and shoving me. A clear, unprovoked act of aggression. Brenda started sputtering immediately. "That video is fake. It's been edited." My son was frightened. The older officer, the one with the weary eyes, just held up a hand. "Ma'am," he said patiently. "Let's just watch." But Sarah wasn't finished. She swiped the screen, and a new video began to play. This one was from a completely different angle, higher up, looking down on the whole scene from across the street. My neighbor, Mr. Harrison, has a security camera in his upstairs office window, Sarah explained calmly. He saw the commotion and texted me the file a minute ago. Mr. Harrison's footage was devastating to Brenda's story. From his vantage point, you could see the teens were actively trying to break the lock. You could see that I had kept a safe distance before Jake lunged. No ambiguity. Then came the final nail in the coffin. "There's one more," Sarah said, her voice like ice. She swiped again. This third video was shakier, filmed on a cell phone from a window by another neighbor woken up by the shouting. But it had the best audio. You could hear my voice, clear as a bell over the storm, "Get away from my gate." Then you could hear Jake's voice, full of teenage venom, yell an expletive as he shoves me, followed by the thud of my fall. 3 different angles, 3 different sources, all telling the exact same story. It was a digital fortress of truth. In that moment, under the flashing police lights and the pouring rain, Brenda Thorne's carefully constructed lie fell apart in less than 60 seconds. She stood there speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. He wasn't a victim. He was a vandal and an assailant, and she was his accomplice. The older officer looked at his young partner, then back at me. His expression was a mixture of apology and respect. "Go find those boys," he said to the young cop. He then turned to me. I was still muddy, still a little dazed, but I was standing tall. "Mr. Carter," he asked, his voice formal. "Given this evidence, are you interested in pressing charges?" I looked past him, directly at Brenda. Her face was a twisted mask of pure, undiluted hatred. I thought about the months of letters, the fines, the creepy inspections, the drone, the developer deal. I thought about how she had tried to use the system to crush us. "Yes, officer," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I am. For trespassing, criminal mischief, and assault." They brought Jake and his friend back, both of them now sobbing and making pathetic excuses. The officers weren't having any of it. They cited both teens, and because of the assault and the use of the bolt cutters, it was serious. It was a matter for juvenile court. They took the bolt cutters as evidence. HOA writes fines. Police write laws. Brenda herded her blubbering son back into their house, but not before she shot me one last look, a look that promised revenge. She had been publicly beaten, her son was in legal trouble, and her lies were exposed. But she was still on the HOA board. The battle of the bolt cutters was over, and we had won, but I knew the war was far from finished. The next morning, as Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, a new resolve settled over us. "She's cornered now," Sarah said, looking at our proof wall. "She's going to use the full power of the board to retaliate. We can't just defend anymore. We have to go on the offensive. And I think I know a way to use their own ridiculous rules against them." Of all the petty, selectively enforced rules, Brenda's favorite was the one about nuisance noise, prohibiting any sound that could unreasonably disturb a neighbor's peace and quiet, 55 dB after 10 p.m. This was the bylaw she had used to fine families for excessive laughing in their own pool. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, like clockwork, Sarah said, pointing to her log book. She and Mike do their security patrol in his golf cart. Mike's golf cart was his pride and joy, customized with a lift kit, oversized tires, and an engine that sounded like a lawnmower in a blender. "I'll bet you anything," Sarah grinned, "that thing breaks their own noise rule." It was a sting operation, HOA style. I ordered a professional grade, certified decibel meter. Not cheap, but necessary for our legal defense fund. We set our trap on Tuesday night. Sarah was upstairs with her camera, time-stamped. I was in the garage, hiding in the shadows with the meter. Our secret weapon was Mr. Harrison, who enthusiastically agreed to be our third-party witness, filming the entire event on his phone while ostensibly taking out his recycling. At 10:17 p.m., we heard it, the sputtering roar of Mike's golf cart. As they approached our house, I held up the decibel meter. The needle jumped, 60 dB. 65, as the cart chugged directly in front of our driveway, with Brenda sitting smugly in the passenger seat, the meter peaked at a whopping 72 dB. Mike revved it, just to be sure. "Routine patrol," Sarah called from the window. "Routine violation," I muttered back, filming the reading on my phone. Mr. Harrison loudly narrated into his phone, "This is Mr. Harrison, live at Operation Loud Cart. Today's forecast, tickets. Rule says 55 dB. They just hit 72. We had them dead to rights." The next morning, I drafted the most meticulously detailed complaint the HOA had ever received, using their own official nuisance noise complaint form. I included the notarized affidavit, the recorded decibel level, and a link to a private web page where I had uploaded all 3 time-stamped videos shot from 3 different angles. I filed the complaint against Mike, the operator, and against Brenda Thorne as the supervising HOA president on official patrol. And here was the masterstroke: instead of just sending it to Brenda, I sent the entire package via certified mail to the home address of every single member of the 5-person HOA board. There was no way for her to intercept it or sweep it under the rug. The result was glorious. The board was forced to address the complaint. With the undeniable video and audio evidence, they had no choice. They had to find their own president guilty of violating the very rules she used to terrorize everyone else. They issued a formal violation notice and a $100 fine to both Brenda and Mike. The public humiliation was immense. The neighborhood saw a crack in her armor. She wasn't untouchable. We had made her look foolish. Riding high on this victory, we decided it was time to end this. We found the clause: any homeowner could call a special meeting of the entire association for any reason, provided they could gather petition signatures from 10% of the homeowners. Sarah printed a petition, a special meeting to address abuses of power and to hold a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president. It was time for a town hall showdown. Gathering the signatures was like rolling a boulder downhill. The moment we started, it gained its own momentum. The story of the decibel meter sting made people laugh, proving she wasn't invincible. The neighbors who had been fined for non-compliant birthday balloons and unharmonious wind chimes signed next. In less than 48 hours, we had signatures from nearly a third of the homes. We formally submitted the petition. When the night arrived, the room was packed. The air was electric with anticipation and resentment. Brenda, Mike, and one other loyalist sat at a table at the front, looking like they were facing a firing squad. Sarah and I set up our laptop connected to a large projector screen. Brenda tried to take control, attempting to bog the meeting down in procedural nonsense, but I had memorized Robert's Rules of Order. I calmly and correctly countered her every move, forcing her to stick to the agenda we had set. When Brenda snapped, "Point of order. This entire slideshow is prejudicial." I smiled. "Point of order sustained, by the facts." Laughter rippled. Mr. Harrison, from the back, stage whispered, "Objection sustained, your gateness." When it was my turn, I didn't yell. I was calm, factual, and prepared. I was just a homeowner telling my story. I projected a photo of the gate onto the screen, then the exact bylaw that proved it was legal. Brick by brick, I built the case: the endless stream of baseless violation notices, the creepy late-night inspections, the drone photos, the police reports. The crowd murmured. Finally, I moved in for the kill. For months, I said, my voice ringing through the silent room, my wife and I couldn't understand why. Why this obsessive, relentless campaign against us over a simple gate? I clicked to the next slide. It was the developer map. The one with the thick red line labeled Pedestrian Access Corridor, cutting right through my property. This, I said, is why. I then projected the emails between Brenda Thorne and the Riverstone Group. I read aloud the parts about the Community Improvement Fund she would control and the finder's fee she was set to receive. The room exploded. People were on their feet shouting. Brenda leaped up, her face pale with fury. "That's a private discussion. It's confidential." But it was too late. Everyone in that room understood. She had abused her power and betrayed them all for her own personal, financial gain. I made 3 motions. The first, to rescind and refund all fines levied against my family. It passed with a thunderous roar. The second, to formally censure Brenda Thorne for abuse of power and conflict of interest. It passed with applause. The third and final motion, a vote of no confidence to remove her as president, effective immediately. The secretary counted twice. 52 to 48. It passed. She was out, stripped of her power in a public forum. She stood there for a moment, stunned, then grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse, her 2 remaining allies trailing behind her like pilot fish. We had won the war. A week later, just as we were starting to breathe again, Brenda filed a formal complaint with the City of Whispering Pines, Department of Planning and Development, claiming my gate was an unpermitted public obstruction. Her last desperate move. The mediation was held in a small, soul-crushingly beige conference room at City Hall. Brenda came in armed for battle, lugging a massive 3-ring binder onto the table. She launched into a polished, well-rehearsed speech about historic community pathways and a prescriptive easement. She painted me as a greedy landowner trying to wall off a piece of the community for himself. The mediator, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Albright, was nodding thoughtfully. When it was my turn, I didn't touch our binder. I simply slid a single folded document across the table. "Ms. Albright," I started, "my wife and I purchased our home 3 years ago. This is a copy of our official, legally recorded boundary survey. As you can see, our property line extends all the way to the creek bed. There is no public easement of any kind noted on our deed." I let that sink in. Then I reached down into my briefcase, pulled out a small, heavy object, and placed it on the table. It made a solid, definitive clack. It was a brand new slide bolt latch, the exact same model that was on my gate. "This piece of hardware," I said, pointing to it, proved so confusing and insurmountable for Ms. Thorne's teenage son that he felt the need to call 911 and report that he was being held captive. Brenda sputtered, "Objection. That's irrelevant." Ms. Albright just raised an eyebrow and motioned for me to continue. "An officer of the law had to come out to our home to provide a live demonstration on the use of this complex technology," I went on. I reached forward and slid the metal bolt into the closed position. Click. "This is locked," I said, making eye contact with the mediator. Then I slid it back open. Clack. "And this is unlocked." I leaned back in my chair and delivered the final line, using the same deadpan, weary tone as the police officer from that very first day. "This," I said, letting the words hang in the air, "is how gates work." A tiny smile, quick as a flash, appeared at the corner of Ms. Albright's mouth. She got it. She realized this was a personal vendetta being played out using city resources. She picked up the latch, felt its weight, placed it back on the table, and looked squarely at Brenda, her professional warmth completely gone. "Ms. Thorne," she said, her voice final. "A gate is not a wall. A simple unlocked latch is not a public obstruction. Your complaint has no merit." The war was finally, truly over. We had won. The aftermath felt like the quiet after a long storm. The new, reasonable HOA board refunded every bogus fine. Jake pled down to criminal mischief, and in return, a judge signed a 5-foot stay-back order on both him and Brenda. 3 weeks later, a "for sale" sign sprouted on Brenda's lawn. The neighborhood breathed again. One evening, Sarah was trimming her roses when our neighbor, Sarah, the one who filmed the storm, walked up. "Thank you," she said shyly. "Brenda fined me $200 because my girl's sidewalk chalk was non-compliant colors. I paid it. I was just tired." Sarah handed her a paper sack of cherry tomatoes from our vines. Next time, Sarah said gently. Knock. We'll fight it together. A bridge rebuilt with produce. Weeks passed. The sold banner went up across the street. On a warm Saturday, I oiled the hinge on the gate while the creak made that easy gurgling sound that lowers your shoulders an inch. Peace felt heavier now, like something earned. Sarah came out with 2 iced teas. She rested on the post and watched me work. After all that stress, she said. The letters, the proof wall, it's still just a gate. I wiped the rag across the latch and looked at the wood we fought for. It wasn't just boards and screws anymore. It was stubbornness documented. It was a line drawn with maps and nerve. I slid the bolt, solid, low thunk, and slid it back. Yeah, I said, finally smiling without weight. But it's our gate. We tapped glasses. Clink. Somewhere, Zeus thumped his tail in the grass. Sarah knelt at the post and pressed basil starts into the soil. I ran a last drop of oil along the latch.